Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving straight into a really significant piece of Jamaican current affairs.
Yes, we're looking at the 2025-2026 budget debate presentation by Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, you've shared excerpts from the official YouTube transcript of his address to Parliament. So, pretty detailed stuff.
It is. Gives us a solid look at his perspective on things.
Okay, so our mission today is really to unpack this. We want to pull out the key insights, where Jamaica's economy stands, according to him, what the big plans are going forward.
And importantly, how the government views its own performance in getting Jamaica to this point.
Definitely. And one thing that struck me right away was the historical context he kept bringing up.
Absolutely. That theme of Jamaica's economic journey since independence, it runs right through the speech, seems crucial to how he frames his arguments now.
Okay, so let's start there. How does the government rate its own economic track record? He made a very strong statement.
He did. He said Jamaica is in its strongest economic position ever since gaining independence. That's quite the claim.
It really is. So what's the reasoning behind it?
Well, the core argument is a shift. Moving from, instability and frequent crises to what he describes as stability, strength, and resilience.
And a big part of that involves comparing his administration to previous ones.
Yes, particularly the PNP. That comparison comes up again and again. It's a recurring theme, you'll notice, as we go through this.
Got it. So let's get into the specifics. First up, inflation. What did he say there?
He stated the average annual inflation under his administration is 5.5%. And he claims that's the lowest since way back in 1972.
5.5% average. And he positioned that within the Bank of Jamaica's target.
Exactly, the 4-6% target range. He made a point of saying this was achieved despite, all the global pressures, post-COVID supply chains, geopolitical stuff.
Right. Things outside their direct control.
He even suggested that without those shocks, the average might have been closer to 4.3%. So for you listening, the message is about managing prices even in tough global times.
And then he drew that sharp contrast with the past.
Oh, definitely. The PNP administration from 89 to 07, he cited an average annual rate of 18.5% and a cumulative figure that's, staggering. Yeah. 2,249%.
Wow. That's hard to even wrap your head around. Did he give any examples?
He did, a relatable one. The cost of a loaf of bread. Reportedly under $1 back in 1980, shooting up to $30 by 2007. That kind of makes the number real, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really drives home the impact on everyday costs.
And he contrasted Jamaica's experience then with U.S. inflation over the same period, which was much, much lower, around 2.9% per year on average.
Okay. And he also mentioned that spike in 92.
Yes, the nearly 80% inflation in 1992, then brought it back to the present, stating the current annual rate is 4.4%. The takeaway message is clearly meant to be things are much more under control now.
So the narrative is one of learning from past mistakes, implementing disciplined policies.
Precisely. Independent central bank, responsible fiscal policies, that's the formula he presented, and using that history to warn against, as he put it, returning to failed policies. It sets up this contrast, past struggles versus current success.
Okay, let's move on to another big one, jobs. What were the numbers there?
Significant figures. Unemployment down from 13.7% in 2016 to a historic low of 3.5%. He called it almost full employment.
3.5%. That is very low. And what about youth unemployment? That's often a major concern.
He addressed that specifically, down from 32% in 2016 to 11%. That suggests a big shift in opportunities, especially for younger people.
And how many actual jobs does that translate to?
The figure given was 253,000 new jobs created since 2016. That averages out to about 28,000 per year.
And again, the comparison.
Yes, compared to the last PNT administration, 2011-2016, which he said averaged around 15,000 jobs per year.
So the government is clearly pointing to these job numbers as proof of economic recovery.
Absolutely. He framed it as real jobs impacting people, families, and communities, trying to connect those stats to real-life improvements. For you listening, it signals that job creation is a key benchmark they're using to measure their own success.
Right. Next up, the exchange rate. Always a hot topic.
Indeed. He stated the average annual depreciation of the Jamaican dollar against the U.S. dollar has been 2.9% over the last 9 years, claiming that's the lowest rate since independence.
2.9% average appreciation. How does that compare historically, according to him?
Again, a stark contrast. He cited the last PNP administration having an average annual depreciation of 88.5%.
88.5%? That sounds incredibly high.
It does. And he pointed to that specific 89 to 07 period again, where the dollar apparently went from around J$5.50 to over J$74 to the U.S. dollar. That's a depreciation of over 1,100%.
Wow. That kind of drop would make imports incredibly expensive, fueling inflation too.
Exactly. So the message here is about current stability. He's highlighting the relative predictability of the exchange rate now as a major achievement.
And what did he attribute this stability to?
A mix of things. Those sound fiscal and monetary policies again, plus investor confidence, and a growing economy attracting capital. The point being, it's not accidental, it's policy-driven. For you, a stable exchange rate generally means less volatility in the prices of imported goods.
Okay, let's talk balance of payments. Jamaica's historical trend there.
Historically, mostly deficits on the current account since independence. More money flowing out than in. Only 5 surplus years in all that time, apparently.
But he highlighted a recent change.
Yes. Surpluses recorded in the last 2 fiscal years, 1.9% of GDP in 2022-23 and 3.1% in 2023-24, and surpluses in 7 of the last 8 quarters.
That does sound like a significant shift from the long-term pattern.
It would be. It's just a stronger position relative to the rest of the world. For you, potentially a sign of a more self-sufficient economy needing less external financing.
Right, more money coming in than going out.
Mm-hmm.
That could definitely have a stabilizing effect. He's presenting this as another win for their management.
Absolutely. Linking it right back to that strongest economy since independence claim, suggesting a move away from long-standing vulnerabilities.
Okay, another key indicator. Net International Reserves, the NIR.
Record high announced. $5.5 billion, which he said covers about 29 weeks of imports of goods and services.
That sounds like a healthy cushion.
It is. Yeah. Provides a buffer against external shocks. He emphasized it's more than double what it was in 2016, an increase of 131%, despite global crises since then.
So more resilience built into the economy.
That's the message. He even used an analogy calling the NIR your rent money, something vital you can't afford to mess up. For you, healthy reserves mean the country is better placed to handle things like sudden oil price spikes or other global economic bumps.
Makes sense. Now, a really big one. Debt-to-GDP. What's the story there?
A dramatic fall reported, from over 120% of GDP in 2016 down to approximately 68.7% now.
That's a huge reduction, and they have a target.
Yes, aiming for 60% by March 2028. Seems they're on track for that.
And he spent quite a bit of time on the history of Jamaica's debt, didn't he?
He did. He highlighted 2 main periods of significant debt distress. The 70s into the 80s.
Linked to oil shocks, global recession, hurricanes, and, as he put it, the democratic socialism experiment.
Right, and then the second period, from the 90s into the late 2010s.
Which he largely attributed to the FinZoc crisis era under the PNP.
Yes, arguing that led to financial collapse and a long downturn, worsened later by the 2008 global crisis.
He seemed quite forceful about the cause of FinZoc.
Very. Called it a homegrown domestic crisis wholly caused by the PNP, stemming from, in his view, premature liberalization of the foreign exchange market in '91 without enough reserves.
Leading to the currency decline, inflation, high interest rates, business and bank failures.
That's the sequence he laid out. For you listening, this detailed history is meant to underscore why the current focus on fiscal discipline and debt reduction is so important based on those past experiences.
And the cost of that FinZoc bailout.
Cited as a massive 42% of GDP. He also highlighted how interest payments on debt ate up nearly 70% of tax revenues at its peak during that time, and again during the global crisis.
And he linked that directly to underinvestment in infrastructure.
Yes, things like roads, hospitals. Saying the money just wasn't there because it was going to service debt, it's a narrative connecting past policies to present infrastructure challenges and the need for their current approach.
Did he acknowledge any prior efforts on debt?
He did, yes. He mentioned the Bruce Golding administration starting the process with the Jamaica Debt Exchange, the JDX, so not claiming all credit for the reduction.
Okay. And what about taxes? Always a key concern.
Big emphasis here. 8 consecutive budgets with no new taxes. This presentation marked the 10th consecutive budget with no net new taxes. He even mentioned some tax reductions implemented.
That's a strong message to send, likely countering opposition claims.
Seems likely. For you, the clear implication is more money potentially staying in people's pockets due to this tax policy.
He also mentioned securitization, using the airport concession as an example.
Right, selling future income streams for a lump sum now. He said the funds were used for debt paydown and infrastructure, like the Highway 2000 extension.
And contrasted that with a past deal.
Yes, the PMP's forward sale of bauxite in 2001. He characterized it as problematic. Fixed price, costs ended up exceeding the price, government had to cover losses, presenting their securitization as a more responsible approach.
Okay, finally, on the achievement side, Poverty reduction.
He stated there's been a steady, measurable decline, except for a temporary spike during the pandemic.
And emphasized empowerment over handouts.
Exactly. Highlighted initiatives like the social pension for seniors, the new social housing program, tourism pension, creative industries insurance, more PATH funding, the planned unemployment insurance, and that Hope for Children trust fund.
The one providing long-term savings for kids in low-income families.
Right. Also mentioned divesting assets like the highway as a way to broaden wealth creation. So that wraps up the government's assessment of its economic track record.
A pretty comprehensive picture they're painting. Okay, let's pivot now to the future. This ASPIRE framework. What is that?
Right, ASPIRE. It's their acronym for the key pillars of their future growth strategy. ASPIRE.
Okay, let's break it down. A is for access to economic opportunities for all. Inclusive growth. He specifically rejected trickle-down economics.
He did. Described their approach as people-centered, opportunity-driven, focusing on empowering people through education, skills training, small business support, community infrastructure.
And strengthening social safety nets, too.
Yes, reinforcing that social protection framework. For you, it signals policies aiming for broad benefits, not just hoping wealth trickles down.
And he elaborated on that HA for Children Trust Fund again.
Yes, emphasizing the government contributions to these long-term savings accounts, accessible at 18 for education, property, or starting a business, positioning it as a tool to break intergenerational poverty cycles.
Seems like a key initiative for that long-term empowerment goal.
It definitely fits that narrative of tackling income and asset inequality, giving young people from tougher backgrounds a potential leg up.
Okay, second pillar. S for safety and security. Obviously, a huge issue.
Absolutely. The PM asserted they're taking decisive action and believe the tide is turning against violent crime.
He cited some statistics.
Yes, significant drops in murders mentioned. 19% down in 2024, 7% in 2023. And February 2025 apparently had the lowest monthly murder total in 25 years.
And a drop in major crimes overall.
21% decline mentioned there. The stated goal is ambitious. Getting murders below 1,000 annually for the first time since 2003. That would be a major milestone.
A huge step. And he attributed this progress to investment.
To what he called the strongest sustained investment in national security in Jamaica's history.
What kind of investments are we talking about?
A whole range. More capital spending, new equipment, vehicles, better intelligence, forensic tech, advanced training, cybercrime, counter-trafficking, financial intelligence. Also, that C5 Command Center for better coordination.
And practical things like police vehicles and stations.
Yep. Mentioned procuring a new fleet, no used car specified, and Project Rock for refurbishing or building police facilities. Plus, salary and pension increases for officers and boosting officer numbers overall.
Acknowledge the JDF's role, too.
Yes, supporting the JCF. Also talked about enhanced border security, new boats, helicopters, planes, scanners at port.
And targeting gangs.
Key focus, dismantling organized crime. Police intel apparently suggests fewer than 100 active gangs now. Mentioned the National Security Council coordinating efforts. It's presented as a very multi-pronged strategy.
Okay, third pillar. P for people. Human capital development.
Right. Focus here on education, training, job opportunities. Mention programs like LFT and CARE again.
And the Heart Trust and CA numbers.
Significant enrollment highlighted. Over 52,000 since 2020. And a big surge, 150,000 plus signups after they eliminated fees. Emphasized public-private partnerships, too, like the Amber Heart Academy. For you, this signals a push to equip the workforce for modern jobs.
There seemed to be a strong STEM focus.
Very much so. Robotics, coding in schools, 3D printers that boost grant for heart grads in STEM fields.
And artificial intelligence, AI, got quite a bit of attention.
It really did. An AI task force, integrating AI and coding into the curriculum, teacher training, a course on prompt engineering.
An AI lab partnership and an AI-powered learning platform.
Yes, the Jamaica Learning Assistant, clearly positioning AI as critical for the future. It's a very forward-looking part of the plan.
Also mentions school buses for rural areas.
Yes, a dedicated system, phased implementation starting September 2025. And on public health, more posts for doctors, nurses, more hospital beds, operating theaters, bigger budget, infrastructure expansion, and that Know Your Numbers preventative screening program.
Okay, fourth pillar, I for infrastructure. This covers a lot of ground.
It really does, starting with water.
Improved supply for 150,000 people mentioned, public and private investment, specific projects like Greater Mandeville and Rare Karab.
Expanding sewer networks in Kingston and St. Andrew, tackling downtown Kingston sewer issues, the Black Tank program, extending the NWC amnesty for disconnected customers.
Right. Then roads. Lots happening there, too.
Southern Coast Highway nearly done. That big $45 billion Spark program for community roads, urban projects like Ramehall Lane.
Investing in Kingston's main corridors, bypasses planned for several towns, the bridge renewal project.
Toll road improvements like extra lanes at Angels Plaza. Introducing open road tolling starting with the Montego Bay Perimeter Road, which itself is progressing. It's a major push on transportation.
And the North Coast Highway extension.
Designated a national development project. Plans for that Mammy Bay interchange extending west and east. Also talked about reviewing road maintenance, possibly a single road authority, using tech like geospatial mapping and AI.
And developing a unified address system and zip code? That could be significant.
Potentially, yes. For efficiency, deliveries, emergency services.
Okay, still under infrastructure.
Housing?
A major focus.
Huge focus. Transforming informal settlements, HAJ working on regularizing tenure, upgrading 81 communities mentioned.
Ambitious targets for housing starts and completions.
Yeah.
Interventions in small urban informal spots, tackling flooding like at Penwood Road.
NLA, improving land titling, aiming for electronic titles by 2027-28, increasing land surveyors, training, that shared community registration bill tabled. It's a complex challenge they're tackling from multiple angles.
And larger plan settlements.
Bernard Lodge mentioned thousands of units built or underway, more planned. Also, the future Greater Inwood Development Area.
And lots of NHC initiatives announced.
Yes, quite a list. Lower service charges for low-income earners, easier grant eligibility, help for unfinished build-on-own land projects, special loans for health workers.
The option for private mortgage holders to get NHT contributions back or applied, faster home improvement loans with higher limits, higher mortgage limits overall.
A directive to focus on houses under $14 million, higher construction loan limits, that 50th anniversary park in Mandeville, more scholarships. Clearly trying to make housing more accessible and affordable.
Also mentioned town center modernization by the FCJ.
Right. Morant Bay, nearly done. Boundbrook planned. Others like Negril, Sablamar to come.
Yeah.
And UDC projects like the Portmore Resilience Park and Ryer Commercial Complex.
And using tax credits to encourage development.
Yes, specifically for urban renewal and affordable housing. It's a very broad infrastructure agenda.
Okay. Fifth pillar. R for reform of the bureaucracy, improving ease of doing business.
Yeah, tackling productivity, which he noted has been declining trend-wise since independence.
The SPEED initiative.
Led by Minister Marks, aiming to streamline processes. Gave concrete examples like the longer certificate of fitness validity for new and newer used cars, the 2-year registration option.
Part of a wider review, especially on approvals.
Exactly. And modernizing post offices into NID service centers. It's about efficiency for businesses and citizens.
And the final pillar, E, economic diversification. Broadening the base.
Moving beyond traditional sectors. Key areas highlighted. Shipping and logistics, digital services, agribusiness, medical tourism, creative industries, renewable energy.
What about shipping and logistics specifically?
Mention the Kingston Container Terminal expansion, more cargo, more jobs, top 100 global ranking now. Also expanding cargo storage at Westlands, moving domestic aviation from Tinson Pen to NMIA. A public-private partnership for Newport West roads, and that big 700-acre Camana Special Economic Zone with groundbreaking apparently scheduled, leveraging Jamaica's location.
Tourism updates were deferred.
Yes, said the Minister of Tourism would provide details separately.
And agriculture. What's the focus there?
Several things. Lowering food costs, boosting farmer productivity, sustainability, reviewing tariffs on certain imported foods, modernizing irrigation, Parnassus Agro Park done, Essex Valley progressing, Pedro Plains starting civil works, investing in R&D, upgrading bodals, partnerships, converting Case to a full agricultural university, improving soil quality, aiming for stronger food security and a more viable ag sector.
And the creative industries, culture, entertainment.
Plans for Fort Rocky as the first official entertainment zone. Minister of Culture, to give more updates, highlighted the $1 billion Jamaica Screen Development Initiative funding already awarded.
Negotiating co-production treaty.
Yes, with Canada, Nigeria, India, South America mentioned. Considering more incentives for film and entertainment, trying to really harness the economic potential of Jamaican culture.
So that covers the Aspire framework. Any other specific social programs mentioned?
Yes, beyond the framework itself. The new social housing program, aiming to end shelter poverty. A renewed solidarity program, a one-time $20,000 grant for 50,000 vulnerable people not in other programs.
And an increase in the minimum wage.
Announced, yes, from $15,000 to $16,000 per 40-hour week, effective June 1st, 2025. So direct support measures alongside the bigger strategic plan.
Okay, well, that brings us pretty much to the end of this very deep dive into the PM's presentation. It's clear they're putting forward a narrative of significant economic turnaround.
Definitely, backed by lots of data points and those constant comparisons to the past. And they've laid out a really ambitious, wide-ranging plan for the future with Aspire.
Covering almost every sector, it seems, plus those ongoing and new social support programs.
Right. The emphasis is on both macroeconomic stability and increasingly on translating that into tangible benefits and opportunities across society.
And the PM's closing message.
A call for national unity, continued effort, emphasizing their track record, urging, informed choices looking ahead.
It's certainly a comprehensive overview of the government's view where things are and where they want to go.
No doubt about that. A very detailed roadmap presented.
So for you listening, after hearing all this, the data, the plans, the initiatives, what parts of Jamaica's economic future seem most promising to you? And maybe, what are the biggest hurdles or challenges you see ahead on this path?
Definitely a lot to think about, a lot to watch as Jamaica moves forward.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.